nipatya vidadhara nakai spurantam tripishta porubhayaha sanashimma rupam Kritva brahmad prukruti damshtra karala vaktram Daityendramasu gadaya bipatantam arad Ura nipatya vidadara nakai spurantam Tripishta poru bhayaha sanashimma rupam Kritva brahmad brukuti damshta karala vaktram Daityendramasu gadaya bipatantam arad Ura nipatya vidadara nakai spurantam Tripishta poru bhayaha sanashimha rupam Kritva brahmad brukuti damshtra karala vaktram Daityendramasu gadaya bipatantam arad Ura nipatya vidadara nakai spurantam Okay. Mataji's. Okay, do it word for word. Trishtapa, the demigods. Urubhayaha, one who vanquishes great fears. Saha, he, the personality of Godhead. Nrsimha Rupam, assuming the incarnation Nrsimha. Kritva, doing so. Ramat, by rolling. Brukuti, eyebrows. Damshtra, teeth. Karala, greatly fearful. Vaktram, mouth. Daitya Indram, the king of the demons. Ashu, immediately. Garaya, with club in hand. Abhipantam, while falling down. Arat, nearby. Aral, on the thighs. Nipatya, placing on. Vidadara, pierced. Akai, by the nails. Spurantam, while challenging. All right, translation purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Okay. The personality of God had assumed the incarnation of Nrsimhadeva in order to vanquish the great fears of the demigods. He killed the king of the demons, Hiranyakasipu, who challenged the Lord with a club in his hand by placing the demon on his thighs and piercing him with his nails, rolling his eyebrows in anger, and showing his fearful teeth and mouth. The history of Hiranyakasipu and his great devotee son Prahlad Maharaj is narrated in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Hiranyakasipu became very powerful by material achievements and thought himself to be immortal by the grace of Brahmaji. Brahmaji declined to award him the benediction of immortality because he himself is not an immortal being. But Hiranyakasipu derived Brahmaji's benediction in a roundabout way, almost equal to becoming an immortal being. Hiranyakasipu was sure that he would not be killed by any man or demigod or by any kind of known weapon, nor would he die during the day or night. The Lord, however, assumed the incarnation of half man and half lion, which was beyond the imagination of a materialistic demon like Hiranyakasipu. And thus, keeping pace with the benediction of Brahmaji, the Lord killed him. He killed him on his lap so that he was killed neither on the land, nor on the water, nor in the sky. The demon was pierced by Nrsimha's nails, which were beyond the human weapons imaginable by Hiranyakasipu. The literal meaning of Hiranyakasipu is one who is after gold and soft bedding, the ultimate aim of all materialistic men. Such demoniac men who have no relationship with God gradually become puffed up by material acquisitions and begin to challenge the authority of the Supreme Lord and torture those who are devotees of the Lord. Prahlad Maharaj happened to be the son of Hiranyakasipu, and because the boy was a great devotee, his father tortured him to the best of his ability. In this extreme situation, the Lord assumed the incarnation of Nrsimhadeva, and just to finish the enemy of the demigods, the Lord killed Hiranyakasipu in a manner beyond the demon's imagination. Materialistic plans of godless demons are always frustrated by the all-powerful Lord. Om Agyanam Timanandasya Gananjanjana Shalakaya Chakshorunmritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishram Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupagadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yukta Padakamanam Shri Guru Vaishramam Shah Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Vakanatam Vitam Tam Shajivam Savadutam Savadutam Harijana Saritam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Bharan Sagaralitam Shri Vishakam Vitam Shah Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikas Swami Nityanamane Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunivadi Paskatari Sacharne Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gauravakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. The personality of God had assumed the incarnation of Nrsimhadeva in order to vanquish the great fears of the demigods. he killed the king of the demons, Hiranyakasipu, who challenged the Lord with a club in his hand. By placing the demon on his thighs and piercing him with his nails, rolling his eyebrows in anger, and showing his fearful teeth and mouth. So this is continuing the narrations of the different avatars of Krishna and the material world. And so this particular incarnation being described, Nrsimhadeva, is famous and well known in general, and in ISKCON also. All these different incarnations that we're speaking of. That's mentioned there in the Bhagavatam and things like that, but generally, on a day-to-day basis, we may not, sing, for instance, every day we sing these different prayers in Nrsimhadeva, but not every single day we may offer prayers to Matsya Avatar or Kurma, or some of the different incarnations like that. So, Srila Prabhupada started this worship within ISKCON, and there's whole history with that. I don't know all the ins and outs and everything, but one time when Prabhupada was sick, I think he introduced the prayers that we sing in the morning. And then there's also too the pastime of Srila Prabhupada instructing Jadharani Mataji to paint Nrsimhadeva with more blood, killing Hiranyakasipu. So in one class that Srila Prabhupada gives on Nrsimhadeva, I'm paraphrasing, he may say it one way or the other, but he opens up by saying that Nrsimhadeva has appeared to prove that the atheist, to prove the atheist that there is no God, joking in that way, something like that, along those lines. So Nrsimhadeva is what our acharyas explain is para-avasta, which means that it's one of the most perfect forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And there are three principal forms that our acharyas describe, one being Nrsimhadeva, the other being Lord Ramachandra, and then the topmost is being Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's not even mentioned here, but maybe Prabhupada says something. But anyways, but Nrsimhadeva appeared to kill Hiranyakasipu was very brief, actually. At least that particular Leela is short, in which Nrsimhadeva actually appears, and the prayers are offered in that sense. It's not described as very long. Where we see as Krishna's pastimes and Lord Ramachandra's pastimes, that they're very extensive and very long, and there's tons of interactions and things like that. And those particular incarnations, they do very many things. Of course, Nrsimhadeva did many things by killing Hiranyakasipu, but for instance, when Krishna was appeared, he killed Putana, and then, he killed so many demons within that time, but then years later he killed Kamsa, and then, years later killing, so many demons, Shishupal, Dantavakra, like this. Balaram killed Ramaharshana Sutta, but their Leela extended for a vast amount of time, and then there's great record of that also in the literatures of the Vedas, and then also the Goswamis and other great acharyas have revealed more depth to that. So, but Nrsimhadeva's appearance was brief, but the impact was very great, actually. All the Lord's incarnations are great, but this one is made more of an impact because of how intense it was, and the intensity of the situation at the time. So it's mentioned here briefly, and we've all heard the pastime many times, and maybe some of us have even read it some in the Bhagavatam of Hiranyakasipu. So this pastime also, it connects in many ways, actually. So the pastime first begins as narration in the third canto, when Kashyapa and Diti is wanting some children, and so anyway, she approaches her husband at an inauspicious time. For the Garbhadana Samskara, there's specific timings at which one has to engage in the act of procreation, which is suitable. So a trained astrologer can tell and see like that this particular sign is in this, area, so then therefore this is favorable, this is unfavorable. And there's different windows at night like that, and of times. So anyway, she approached her husband at an inauspicious time, and Kashyapa, he attempted to, tell her no, but he wasn't very strong in that sense. And so she bugged him quite for some time, and then eventually he said okay, and then, this isn't going to be good. Shiva will see this, and this will be very inauspicious. So anyways, he engaged in that inauspicious act, and by the will of the Lord, two great demons were born, Hiranyakasipu and Hiranyakasipu. So the Bhagavatam gives the understanding that, at least in this particular pastime with Nrsimhadeva, that those, and Hiranyakasipu, that those were great devotees, Jai and Vijay. And that Jai and Vijay, there's different understandings given, but that they had a desire the Lord had a desire to fight, and so he could only fight with his devotees. And also described that they heard glorification of Narayan and Vaikuntha, of his fighting. So in that sense, they had developed a desire to see the Supreme Lord fight. So Hiranyakasipu. So anyway, so they were born, and there was all these different inauspicious omens. I think like blood and bones and things like that falling from the sky, and like it was a terrible scene. So when they were born, they immediately had some Shakti and things and began to terrorize the universe. And so, anyways, without getting all the details of Hiranyakasipu, he was going around and terrorizing devotees and things like that. And eventually, he came in contact with Varaha. And so, I was thinking a little bit of the difference with Varahadev and Hiranyakasipu. Is that Hiranyakasipu, there was like some talking between him and Varaha and some arguing and things like that. But whereas with Hiranyakasipu, there wasn't much of an argument or anything like that. And also it's given that Nrsimhadev's form is beautiful, of course, but it was also extremely fearful and extremely scary. We don't really hear so much of Varaha's appearance as being so scary and so fearful. Hiranyakasipu was thinking, at least we read that he was thinking of this amphibian beast and like that, and was criticizing in that way. And this Supreme Personality of Godhead in both of those incarnations fought with those demons for some time, and I believe to describe that Varaha ultimately smacked him. And also too, I believe it's mentioned that Hiranyakasipu did like some special magic or something like that, and but then eventually, Varahadev smacked him in the face and killed him. And so that, instance, they were both natural enemies of Vishnu, being demons, Hiranyakasipu and Hiranyakasipu. But Hiranyakasipu then had this anger towards Vishnu. And he was, claiming that Vishnu had hidden himself away. And we see in the 7th canto that he spoke philosophy to console his mother, that, well, there's the soul and the body's gone, but then the soul is still living and like that. And he had some understanding of the Vedas. So Hiranyakasipu, his anger towards Vishnu was, in one sense, in the material sense, it was understandable, because generally, unless someone is a great soul or, highly philosophical or whatever, it's difficult to rationalize the killing of one's close and dear family member by another individual, and to get over that and to come to terms with that. Yeah, so many times we see that if somebody kills somebody or whatever, there's like this there's this hatred in the family towards that individual. So Hiranyakasipu's anger was not what's the word? It wasn't unimaginable, but it was misplaced. But anyways, even it's to mention too that even if one has anger towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that anger will still purify one, and one can become liberated in that sense. And then there it's given the example of Kamsa, how he meditated so much on Krishna, and in anger and then in fear of thinking of him constantly. And Narada Muni, in his humility in the 7th canto, says, well, mentions that these people like that, they think of Krishna more than him. And we see Shishupal also, he also thought of Krishna very much in a mood of criticism. So Hiranyakasipu, his whole aim in life, as Srila Prabhupada mentions here, his name said it all. One who is after gold and soft bedding is the aim of all materialistic men. So specifically materialistic men, they're after gold, money, position, power, and then also soft bed, but not soft bed in the sense of going to the mattress store and figuring out what the softest bed is, what the best linen. But their interest is in soft beds to engage in sex life. Prabhupada in another place mentions that the soft bed means soft bed companion. So Hiranyakasipu achieved the highest position in the material world by being in the topmost situation, but also too of having much enjoyment for sex life in that position. It's not described so much in the Bhagavatam, but I mean his name says it all. Ravana, there's some instance given of him when he would have his parties and things like that, and people would be drunk and naked in his kingdom. So Hiranyakasipu, by his intelligence, was thinking, if I do this and do that, then I can become immortal. I can't be killed the day or the night or this or that. So he thought very intelligently he had become immortal. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead is more intelligent than any materialist. And so he was able to thwart Hiranyakasipu's plan to become immortal and stop his terrorizing the universe, and also specifically of the great Mahabhagavat Prahlad Maharaj. So Nrsimhadeva, he appeared briefly, but sometimes too brief things that happen and intense situations that happen are remembered and felt for years and years down the line. Like I was thinking in this relation that's mentioned with the dropping of the atomic bomb. Though that situation was something that was brief, the effects, of course, of the bomb are long-lasting, the nuclear fallout and things like that. But the explosion in and of itself didn't last that long. But then people give accounts of remembering, white light and being thrown across the room and all these different things like that within the city. So Nrsimhadeva's appearance was something like that. And I'll read a little bit from the Bhagavatam. I don't know if you want to pull it up here, but it's going to take me a minute because I got to click around and stuff. So, but Nrsimhadeva's appearance was something so intense like that. And then it's also described too, he killed Hiranyakasipu, but he also killed a lot of his followers. And it surely was a bloody scene. Blood and gore and things like that. So, let's see here. So this is relayed in the 8th chapter of the 7th canto. And I won't read so much of it, I'll just read a little bit of just his appearance, just to cite and show the situation at hand. So, anyways, I'll start reading, so I'll start reading from verse 13, and I'll just read some of the translations and speak a little bit about that. So, let's see here. We can start with 11 actually. Hiranyakasipu is speaking. So anyway, so Prahlad Maharaj is explaining that, Hiranyakasipu is angry, asking, where are you getting your power from? Because Hiranyakasipu is extremely powerful, and all the demigods at that time, no one had stood up to him and tried to put him in his place. Everybody was afraid of him because they knew how powerful he was, and he was going and defeating everybody and capturing all the posts and things like that. And so Hiranyakasipu didn't have to deal with anybody, talking back to him or defying his authority, but Prahlad Maharaj was. And he was trying to kill Prahlad Maharaj, but he wasn't able to do so. So he was understanding that this boy has some power, that he's able to stand up to me. And so he was getting fried out. And so in the height of his anger, so verse 11 he begins to, I'm assuming he's yelling. Hiranyakasipu replied, "You rascal, you are trying to minimize my value as if you were better than me at controlling the senses. This is over-intelligent. I can therefore understand that you desire to die by my hands, for this kind of nonsensical talk is indulged by those about to die. O most unfortunate Prahlad, you have always described a supreme being other than me, a supreme being who is above everything, who is the controller of everyone, and who is all pervading. But where is he? If he is everywhere, then why is he not present before me in this pillar? Well, there's a good sense in his materialistic eyes, because, you talk about this, there's a being that's all pervaded, he's everywhere, it's in everything. I don't see him, I don't see, this super powerful being you're talking about. His atheistic mentality. Because you are speaking so much nonsense, I shall now sever your head from your body. Now let me see your most worshipful God come to protect you. I want to see it. Being obsessed with anger, Hiranyakasipu, who was very great in bodily strength, thus chastised his exalted devotee son Prahlad with harsh words. Cursing him again and again, Hiranyakasipu took up his sword, got up from his royal throne, and with great anger struck his fist against the column. And then this text begins to describe Nrsimhadeva's appearance. Then from within the pillar came a fearful sound, which appeared to crack the covering of the universe. O my dear Yudhishthira, this sound reached even the abodes of the demigods, like Lord Brahma, and when the demigods heard it, they thought, oh, now our planets are being destroyed. So this was a big sound, actually. It was like, I don't know what that sound was like. It gives here, which appeared to crack the covering of the universe. So that was probably some crazy, intense sound. Like sometimes when you hear like lightning or when you hear thunder, it's like pretty intense, especially the closer you are. I mean, it's like sounds like something splitting in two. And then if the lightning hits something and then there's thunder, you can like hear that, and it's a intense sound. It uses about as intense as it gets. And anyways, maybe a bomb going off also sounds intense, a big bomb. So they were fearful and described that was even heard in Lord Brahma's abode. So that's for something to be, Lord Brahma's abode is so many millions of miles away from where this took place. And so to hear something a million miles away also, to hear that all over the universe. So they were thinking that, that everything's about to be destroyed. While showing his extraordinary prowess, Hiranyakasipu, who desired to kill his own son, heard that wonderful tumultuous sound, which had never been heard before. Upon hearing the sound, the other leaders of the demons were afraid. None of them could find the origin of that sound in the assembly. So a couple things here. So the mentality of a demon's also highlighted here, that someone who's demoniac is willing to kill their own son. And also too that this upon that sound that was heard, they were instantly afraid, and no one knew where that sound had came from. They heard it, but they didn't know what was going on. Let me see if there's anything said here. I'll read that little bit of this purport here, actually, because something just came to mind, and I think it's mentioned here. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Rasoham apsukunteya prabhasmi shashashuyayo pranava sarvavedeshu sabdike parashom nashu. O son of Kunti, I am the taste of water, the light of the sun and the moon, the syllable Om in the Vedic mantras. I am the sound in ether and ability in man. Here the Lord exhibited his presence everywhere by the tumultuous sound in the sky, Shabdake. The tumultuous thundering sound was proof of the Lord's presence. The demons like Hiranyakasipu could now realize the supreme ruling power of the Lord, and thus Hiranyakasipu became afraid. However powerful a man may be, he always fears the sound of a thunderbolt. Similarly, Hiranyakasipu and all the demons who were his associates were extremely afraid because of the presence of the Supreme Lord in the form of sound, although they could not trace out the source of the sound. So anyways, that came to mind, and I just wanted to read this just to make sure, but that they heard the Supreme Lord in the form of sound. So that was, the material things have their limit, but spiritual things, they have no limit. So the amount of fear that the Supreme Personality of Godhead can invoke in an individual is unlimited. So they were extremely afraid and had no idea of what was going on. And also, too, it's described, even the demigods and things were afraid also of the situation at hand. So, text 17. To prove that the statement of his servant Prahlad, Maharaj, was substantial, in other words, to prove that the Supreme Lord is present everywhere, even within the pillar of an assembly hall, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, exhibited a wonderful form never seen before. That form was neither that of a man nor that of a lion. Thus the Lord appeared in his wonderful form in the assembly hall. So the appearance of Varahadev, of course, is unique in and of itself. The Supreme Lord is appearing in the form of a boar. But specifically, it's mentioned here that that form was never seen before. So there may have been, like, oh, this looks like, this is, whatever. This is just some big, like, I think Hiranyakasipu was saying, some amphibian beast or something like that. It was something within the realm of understanding that this is a boar appearing. But when the Nrsimhadev's appearance, it was something that had never been seen before. There wasn't, like some race of half mans, half lions roaming around on some planet in the universe, and then they were like, oh, it must be from that planet in the universe. It was something that hadn't been seen before. And it was frightening, because they couldn't tell whether it was a man or it was a lion. When Hiranyakasipu looked around to find the source of the sound, that wonderful form of the Lord, which could not be ascertained to be either a man or a lion, emerged from the pillar. In amazement, Hiranyakasipu wondered, what is this creature, this half man and half lion? So, anyway, so many things can be said about that. And so many different things are amazing. The sound, the thundering sound is amazing and shocking. And then where that sound comes from. And then also, too, this half man, half lion is, and what is it here? It's coming out of the pillar. That is also, so many different things are scary about that. That sound is scary, and then you look at the pillar, and then there's this huge animal, this lion coming out of that pillar out of nowhere, and thinking, what kind of magic is this? So continuing, Hiranyakasipu studied the form of the Lord, trying to decide who the form of Nrsimhadeva standing before him was. The Lord's form was extremely fearsome because of his angry eyes, which resembled molten gold, his shining mane, which expanded the dimensions of his fearful face, his deadly teeth, and his razor-sharp tongue, which moved about like a dueling sword. His ears were erect and motionless, and his nostrils and gaping mouth appeared like caves of a mountain. His jaws parted fearfully, and his entire body touched the sky. His neck was very short and thick, his chest broad, his waist thin, and the hairs on his body as white as the rays of the moon. His arms, which resembled flanks of soldiers, spread in all directions as he killed the demons, rogues, and atheists with his conch shell, disc, club, lotus, and other natural weapons. So you can see how intense it is. This huge, they don't know. They're trying to figure out who the form is, what is going on, where this, what is the situation at hand. It's Hiranyakasipu. He picked the wrong side to be on, and so this is the result of being an atheist. Actually, is that you put yourself against, I think it was Mao's Zedong or something. I forget his name, but Mao used to say, power comes from the barrel of a gun. So that you don't want to be on the. It's one thing to be in power than to have that gun and to be pointing it at somebody, but it's a whole other thing to have a gun being pointed at you. And so Hiranyakasipu was on the other side of the gun of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And there's so many different. He's scared. It's one thing to be scared of a situation, but then to be completely bewildered about what's going on and what's going to happen and the situation. So this was an instance in which Hiranyakasipu was actually fearful and scared of the situation. And so, anyways, I just read a little bit more, and then that's that. But so text 23. Hiranyakasipu murmured to himself, Lord Vishnu, so he's not even yelling, he's just talking to himself. Lord Vishnu, who possesses great mystic power, has made this plan to kill me. But what is the use of such an attempt? Who can fight with me? Thinking like this and taking up his club, Hiranyakasipu attacked the Lord like an elephant. So like we were talking about yesterday, David Mittermar was mentioning that the atheists, that there's so many, they're I forget exactly how he was saying, but anyways, but the point was that that the atheists, that they're in ignorance, that they don't have full knowledge, but even though they don't understand something, but they very emphatically claim that they're just the what's it called, the God of the gaps, but then they fill in all their gaps with matter. So then they try to intimidate. So even though he himself, he was trying to now think, he can't fight with me. So then he began to try to kill the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So continuing, just as a small insect falls forcibly into a fire and the insignificant creature becomes invisible, when Hiranyakasipu attacked the Lord, who was full of effulgence, Hiranyakasipu became invisible. This is not at all astonishing, for the Lord is always situated in pure goodness. Formerly during creation, he entered the dark universe and illuminated it by his spiritual effulgence. Text 25. Thereafter, the great demon Hiranyakasipu, who was extremely angry, swiftly attacked Nrsimhadeva with his club and began to beat him. Lord Nrsimhadeva, however, captured the great demon along with his club, just as Garuda might capture a snake. So anyways, this text go on describing Hiranyakasipu fighting with Nrsimhadeva. And so I'll just jump to text 28, and this will be the last one I'll read in this section. So, making a loud, shrill sound of laughter, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, who is extremely strong and powerful, captured Hiranyakasipu, who was protecting himself with his sword and shield, leaving no gaps open. With the speed of a hawk, Hiranyakasipu moved sometimes in the sky and sometimes on earth. His eyes closed because of fear of Nrsimhadeva's laughter. So Hiranyakasipu was in fear, and Nrsimhadeva was laughing. And it's described too that Nrsimhadeva was extremely huge in form. I mean, it's described that he was like touching the sky. So Hiranyakasipu was, the description was given there, he's like a fly. It's just, he's going and he's attacking this humongous form, but he's, it's ridiculous in one sense, actually. The Supreme Lord is so big and he's just so small. So Hiranyakasipu was afraid. And we see too that Hiranyakasipu was, the biggest of the demons, the baddest of the baddest. He was an evil person, and he was extremely powerful. We don't hear of someone as powerful as he was in this day and age, because there's demons, but they're weak demons. But he was afraid. But then simultaneously also too, we read in this verse, I was thinking that this, where is this exactly? But this, Urubayaha. It's described that, so Nrsimhadeva appeared, he vanquished his fears, the great fears. But then Hiranyakasipu was fearful of Nrsimhadeva, so Nrsimhadeva's not vanquishing his fear. So one answer I was thinking to that is that and I'll pull that up here, but the reason why is that answer is found in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, text 37. You don't have to pull this up, I'll just read it. But it's a famous verse that Prabhupada would quote again and again. This Bhayam Dvityaya Bini Vishetashad Ishad Apetasya Viparyo Smritihi. So this Viparyo Smritihi, this opposite thinking. So the translation of that verse is that fear arises when a living entity misidentifies themselves as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. When the living entity thus turns away from the Supreme Lord, he also forgets his own constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. This bewildering condition is affected by the potency of illusion called Maya. So that verse explains that when the living entity turns his back on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he becomes fearful. He becomes afraid. So the complete, the very essence of what Hiranyakasipu is turning his back on is now before him. And he's afraid. And because he doesn't have a devotional attitude, he's not, he's afraid. He he's fearful. And so the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who he's against and he's angry at and all these different things, is present before him. So Nrsimhadev, in one sense, is inspiring fear. So he's not vanquishing that fear. Ultimately, he'll vanquish his fear from material existence, but he's inspiring fear because he doesn't have the proper consciousness of understanding who Nrsimhadev is. Even those that had the proper consciousness, by the will of the Lord, they were fearful of him also. The demigods and things like that, they were fearful of the situation. So that fear of the greatness of the Lord, and then the fear of thinking the Lord is an enemy, of course, that everything is purifying and helpful. But when one is a devotee, even one may be worried or scared or something like that. But that's purifying because one has the proper understanding that even though one may be scared, but that the Supreme Lord is my shelter. Whereas Hiranyakasipu was thinking my shelter is my fist and my sword and my weapons and my intelligence. So Nrsimhadev appeared and he vanquished the fears of the demigods by killing Hiranyakasipu. And so I'm going to digress a little bit. What time is it? And I wanted to speak on Nrsimhadev, but just a different aspect of Nrsimhadev. So this pastime in particular, of this very ferocious form of Nrsimhadev, protecting his devotees and killing the demons, is very amazing and very wonderful. But this rasa is also there within, it's within the Vaishnava Sampradayas of Nrsimhadev protecting his devotees and things. And devotees take shelter of Nrsimhadev in that mood generally. And also we see that within the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, of devotees taking shelter of Nrsimhadev and praying to Nrsimhadev, and also some devotees worshiping exclusively Nrsimhadev for the protection in their service and for removing obstacles which may inhibit one for executing Krishna consciousness. So in Mayapur, that's probably the most famous form of Nrsimhadev within our society, and probably also too, maybe even within the world, or some of them, maybe even within Bengal. There's so many people go on tour and see like that, but it's in Mayapur they have these pictures and things like that is well known. But Lord Nrsimhadev there. So Nrsimhadev was installed in Mayapur in the March 20, or not in March, but they began to think of getting Nrsimhadev there after the attack on the Mayapur temple. So you all heard of that attack on the Mayapur temple? You haven't heard? Have you heard? There was an attack on the Mayapur temple. There was two, I believe. There was this, like a small one, and I think there was this main one here, which happened on the 24th of March. So anyways, what happened was that the Mayapur temple was attacked by dacoits, which are professional thieves. Just like yesterday, I think we had a little thief. I think, at least that was my understanding. Anyways, I don't know. You saw that? You know about that? You know about that? That car? No, the car outside yesterday. So anyways, there's been multiple instances of that. So sometimes there's little thieves. Somebody like sees something and then they get the inspiration like, oh, I could steal. They like see the window of opportunity and they go for it. They're not really like meditating upon it, like a bank robbery. Like people will meditate upon it and then they'll get the plans for the bank and they'll have so many people come and then they'll go, at this time. Like you see it anyways, American history, there's Bonnie and Clyde. So they would go and the whole group of them would go and rob banks and things like that and there's, and go from town to town and things and get away and steal lots of money. So there's professional thieves and then there's just thieves in the moment that just they steal a car in broad daylight and try to get away with it. So these dacoits, they had heard some rumor, I believe, that the Radha-Krishna deity in the temple was made of pure gold. So then they conspired to steal that. And so they came at one time and they weren't successful. And then they came another time. And so they came with bombs and things like that, and they were attacking the temple. And Bhakti Raga Maharaj, who was at this camp in Czech, he's there and he speaks a little bit also. But he was there and he tried to fend off the attackers. And his leg wasn't good at that time, but his leg actually got blown off by one of the bombs that one of these thieves threw at him. And I've heard that he was, I mean, I've heard so many accounts of that, but there was so many devotees there, and most of the devotees, which is understandable according to one's realization, but they locked themselves away in the room and hid. And one devotee was explaining to me that he was just shaking in fear, and he was so scared he didn't know what to do, and he just hid away. But Bhakti Raga Maharaj, and the mood of a great devotee, he came out, and even though he wasn't much he can do, he had that mood and understanding of trying to protect the Supreme Personality of God and try to defend for Srila Prabhupada's temple. So his leg wasn't that good, and it was blown off, and he was laying there in a pool of blood and chanting the holy names of the Lord. So anyways, those dacoits came, and then they took that deity and things. And so afterwards, from what I've read, Bhavananda Maharaj at the time began to suggest that they need to install Ugra Nrsimha to protect the temple and to fend off all the these thieves and demons that were trying to come and attack the temple. So the devotees went to go look for that. And do you know exactly what that was? That Pankajangari Prabhu who did that when looking for this, or is it Atmatapa? Okay, that's what I thought. So he went looking, and then no one wanted to make this particular form of Nrsimhadeva because it was Ugra Nrsimha. It's a very fearful form, Just like I remember when I first moved into the temple, they had a picture of Nrsimhadeva, but it wasn't this. They had that picture on the altar, I believe. Every single day, if you don't remember. I'm pretty sure it was that picture on the altar. Maybe small. But on the wall, they had the picture of Nrsimhadeva where he's like nice and peaceful, which is good. And there's like, the demigods are there and everything, and he's like happy. But they didn't want to put up, they specifically said, they didn't want to put up that picture of Nrsimhadeva, that big picture, because it's scary and what will people think. So even amongst our society sometimes, devotees are afraid to show that picture of Nrsimhadeva, of him ripping out the guts of Hiranyakasipu and blood going everywhere. And it is scary. I remember when I first went to the temple and I was reading the translation to that prayer, I thought that was pretty intense. It just described that, then Nrsimhadeva is ripping open Hiranyakasipu like a wasp, with his wasp-like nails, ripping out the intestines of the demon. So nobody wanted to make that form because they were saying considering it's inauspicious to make that. He's so angry, he's so afraid, he's so fearful. Nobody wanted to do it. And then I think it was later down the line. Anyways, but it was cited that there's this form, one of the sculpture was cited, that there's this form, Nrsimhadeva, that was made, and it wasn't worshipped properly, because to worship this Ugra Nrsimha, one has to be a Naistika brahmachari since birth. And so, I don't know, there's not so many of those walking around on the street. And especially nowadays, it's getting more and more difficult. In India, I think that's more common. But what to speak in the West? So they were saying, and then they installed this form, and then nobody was able to worship it properly. And then that town in which it was being worshipped, they were saying became a ghost town due to offenses of not worshiping Nrsimhadeva properly. So anyways, nobody wanted to do it, and they were scared. So then eventually this Amitava Prabhu found one sculptor who was able to draw it very nicely, the exact form that they wanted. So then he was thinking, oh great, then I think he went back to Mayapur and showed them, and they said, okay, great, we'll have this person do it. So he went and asked the sculptor, can you do it? And he said, no way, I'm not going to do it. And so anyway, so then he went and asked his guru about it, about doing this form, and he was saying, don't do this form. And I think his guru mentioned that there's so many problems at this one place from that form, and like, don't do it, it's don't take it up. He wouldn't give it. And so anyway, so then he said, he's not going to do it. His guru said no. But then that devotee, or sculpture, he may have been a devotee of sorts, I don't know exactly how much. But anyways, also too, one thing is that this sculpture, what is it called, Stalpati? I should have wrote it down. The actual sculpture? Yeah. Stapati. Okay. But it's a whole Vedic science, and it's an art. So anyways, it's not just like, whatever, you go to Arctic school or something. So there's all these Vedic sciences entwined with them, if learned properly, as it's devotion for Bhagavan, for Krishna, for Vishnu, and it has a theistic outlook entwined into it. Versus like you go to school and you learn, whatever science or art, whatever. You learn anything and it's atheistic because it has no connection to God. But the Vedic sciences, they were connected in that way. So then eventually he said he's not going to do it. And then in the next morning, this sculptor, he had a dream where his guru came to him and told him to take up this job and to sculpt Nrsimhadev, to manifest this form. And so anyways, he had that dream and he was thinking, well, maybe I'll do it. And then his guru actually came to his house that morning to tell him that he should take up that service and sculpt that Nrsimhadev form for the devotees in ISKCON. And so anyways, so the sculptor takes up the job, and then there's some problems here and there. And he explains that it's a science and he needs to get the specific stone, because like I was explaining, there's a science to it. So to carve the deity and the stone, that sculpture is making the point that it has to ring in 7 places, and there has to be a bug that eats the stone in a certain way, because then this indicates that the stone is living, and that the Supreme Personality of Godhead will enter into the stone. So then, anyways, he takes some time, and it takes a while from actually to begin to to find the proper stone in order to carve Nrsimhadev, to manifest the Lord's presence. So this goes on, he gets the stone and things like that, and it'll take this amount of time. So then the devotees were explaining about how that they wanted a form of Prahlad Maharaj also. And so he was explaining that, because the form of Nrsimhadev was going to be 4 feet. So he was saying that, if you want to form, he was beginning to laugh, if you want to form a Prahlad Maharaj, you'll have to be small, like an amoeba, like some little like cell or particle or something like that. And they were saying, well, we want a 1 foot deity of Prahlad. And he's saying, okay, if you want a 1 foot deity of Prahlad, then I'll have to carve Nrsimhadev 120 feet. He was saying in this way, he wasn't into it. So we can see there too that the actual form of Nrsimhadev, if Prahlad was 1 foot or whatever, it's the references, for every, whatever. He's 120 times bigger. So we can imagine how big Nrsimhadev actually was when Hiranyakasipu was fighting with him. He was humongous. That's radically 120% bigger. Well, 120. Anyways, so much. I don't think 120 actually. It's 120 times. That's crazy. But anyway, so he finally acquiesces, and then he works on this form of Nrsimhadev. And once he finishes, it's in this thatched hut. And so he finishes, and then for some time he's going about his days. And then he hears about how this thatched hut that he has, it's burned down somehow or other, and some different things around it had burned down. And the only thing there is Nrsimhadev. So then he understands at this point that he calls the ISKCON devotees or gets in contact with them somehow, I guess Apatapa Prabhu, and tells them that Nrsimhadev is ready to go. Come get him immediately. So anyways, the devotees take Nrsimhadev there, they perform, the ceremonies and everything like that, and they install Nrsimhadev. So the point of this is that this mood and this bhav of being spoken of in the Bhagavatam, of Nrsimhadev reciprocating with his devotees and protecting them, still goes on today. This pastime is here, and this Leela is here, of devotees, and there's so many devotees in the world who have taken shelter of Nrsimhadev, who have experienced Nrsimhadev manifesting and interacting with them, and helping them in their service, and also helping them in extreme circumstances. Because generally when there's some great difficulty or great trouble or danger in one's life, devotees generally take shelter of Nrsimhadev. They pray for help, they pray for protection. There's instances of that. I remember in New York, even when there's some crazy person coming and trying to attack the Harinam, Kalki Krishna Prabhu if he was chanting, he would start saying, chanting Nrsimhadev prayers or something like that. Or even if he wasn't, he would be like Jai Nrsimha or something like that. And even other devotees who may have been, assaulted or, someone was coming at them aggressively, they would pray to Nrsimhadev. And sometimes Nrsimhadev would protect them also. But we should understand too that even if we pray to Nrsimhadev and something difficulty happens or we get into some trouble or whatever, that difficulty, that may have been arranged by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to protect us in another way. Because to always protect the material body, or to protect one's health or whatever it may not be the best situation actually for our devotional service. Maybe they think, oh, if I'm very healthy and this and that, then I'll perform Krishna consciousness very seriously. Maybe not. Maybe sometimes it takes that we have to be taken to, just like I know one devotee, he was dying actually, and so when you die, and some people they see and they have visions. So his vision was that he was dying, and across the room he saw his grandmother calling him to come with me, and so he was like, oh no, that's not good, and he was afterwards he was relating that to me, that it wasn't Srila Prabhupada that came or anything like that. It was his dead grandmother was calling him. And so after that he was saying, I got to be more serious in my Krishna consciousness. So sometimes that may be needed, or we may be in a situation, or we may get very sick for an extended period of time, and we may pray to Krishna, or we may be in a difficult circumstance for years and years on end. Because we see that Prahlad Maharaj, that Nrsimhadeva he could have came immediately, and he didn't come immediately, and we can take that as a lesson that sometimes we may need to go through an extreme situation. Because we could say, so many different things can be analyzed and looked at that situation. That Prahlad Maharaj is the Mahabhagavat, but then his father is the greatest demon in the universe. So how was that arranged exactly? Because generally we see it was a Shrutinam Shrimatam Gehe Yoga Brashta Vijayate. Of course, Prahlad Maharaj didn't fall from the path of devotional service, but we see like Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Srila Prabhupada, great Mahabhagavats coming down in the material world, took their birth in Vaishnava families. Hiranyakasipu wasn't a Vaishnava at all. And so why, and we could see too, looking at the Pandavas, why going through so much suffering for so long and so many things like that. But it's to teach us that sometimes in devotional service we have to go through difficult circumstances, day in, day out, year after year. It may be so much time, but we can see that the Supreme Lord always protects us and always maintains us. And the Srimad Bhagavatam explains this, that the Supreme Lord is protecting his devotees. Just like we see with Ajamya, the Supreme Lord came to protect him and deliver him at the end, after he was done engaging in his nonsense. And also we see with Vritasura, which is a better example, that even though he was placed into a difficult circumstance, being born in the body of the demon, his devotional service was protected. So in all circumstances, in our Krishna consciousness, we may be put into different difficult circumstances, materially speaking. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, will always protect our devotion onto him. And we have to also protect that also by following the protection that he gives in the form of the sadhana of Krishna consciousness, of chanting our rounds, of following the four principles, of engaging in the service of the spiritual master, and taking shelter of the association of devotees. So this Leela of Nrsimhadeva, of him protecting his devotees, of removing fear, of vanquishing fear, as we read here, this is, Nrsimhadeva is reciprocating with them, with his devotees. Sorry, trying to see the time. And so, and there's so many different ways in which Nrsimhadeva protects. Also, he may, materially we're speaking. I remember also on traveling Sankirtan, there's one verse. You can pull this up actually. I think it's 5:18:8. So you can pull up that verse. So even too, there's different aspects of which devotees take shelter from Nrsimhadeva. Not that it's any different now, but especially, being, getting the opportunity to be trained up in the Brahmacharya ashram. It's also mentioned in the beginning of that Brahmacharya handbook, but of taking shelter of Nrsimhadeva also. And I wouldn't say that that's just limited just to Brahmacharis, but everybody can take shelter of Nrsimhadeva to help one become free from all different types of desires which may inhibit one in devotional service. But even too, Brahmacharis may pray to Nrsimhadeva to help them overcome lust and things like that. Like I know one devotee anyway, so he would chant this verse every night. I also would chant every day, and I still regularly chant this. But he would chant, praying to, I guess when he would go to, I don't really know exactly why he would do that. I never really asked him. But he would chant this every night before he would go to bed. And sometimes I would notice that he wouldn't chant that, so then I would chant it for him, while he was sleeping. And then sometimes he would say, "Oh, I didn't chant it that night. I messed up." I said, "Oh, don't worry, I chanted it for you out loud while you were sleeping." So this verse here is it's very amazing in many different ways. So this verse, Om Namo Bhagavate Nrsimhaya Namateja Tejase Avir Avir Bhava Vajranaka Vajradamsha Karmashayan Randaya Randaya Tamo Grasagosa Om Swaha Abhayam Abhayam Atmani Bhuisha Om Shrom. So the translation is very wonderful. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Lord Nrsimhadeva, source of all power. O my Lord, who possesses nails and teeth just like thunderbolts, kindly vanquish our demon-like desires for fruitive activity in this material world. Please appear in our hearts and drive away our ignorance, so that by your mercy we may become fearless in the struggle for existence in the material world. So I remember reading this verse, and I think it's the last sentence. Yeah, the last sentence. So the last sentence of the verse said, any devotee aspiring to be free of material desires should offer respectful prayers to Nrsimhadeva, as Prahlad Maharaj did in this verse. So desiring to become free from material desires, we should offer prayers to Nrsimhadeva. And then this verse here shows the whole mood. So I remember, for some reason, I remember this last sentence. And, when I first learned this verse, read this verse, like reading Bhagavatam, and somehow down the line, I guess, just by reading Prabhupada's books, it came, I thought, I want to be free from material desires. And then the connection came in of this last sentence. And I was thinking, this verse here is praying for that, and Srila Prabhupada's saying this in this verse, specifically that, one should offer his prayers like Prahlad Maharaj did in this verse. So I thought, I should learn this verse, because at least, it's like, not that just by learning a verse you become free from material desires, but just my whole mood with going about that was that, at least I'll show I'm serious, and then maybe somehow or other, there's different slokas that I chant and like to chant, and I don't have realization of them all at all, but I think of Gajendra, when he learned those slokas and prayers, and then there came a time when he chanted them, and then he really got into the mood of those prayers, and Krishna reciprocated with him. So I was thinking, I'll learn this sloka, and then eventually one day, maybe the pressure will be there, and then Krishna will reciprocate with my prayer. So anyways, I learned that verse, and I think it's important for all devotees to learn that verse, no matter whether one's a brahmachari, brahmacharini, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyas, because it's relevant to everybody, because we all have material desires in the material world, And it's, brahmachari struggling in one way, the grihastha struggling in another way, the brahmacharini struggling in another way, and the sannyasi struggling in another way too. It's not that, that the sannyasi has no problems or whatever, or, that his life is great and amazing. His life is great and amazing. All devotees' lives are great and amazing in Krishna consciousness. But sometimes, just due to the situation we're in, we have different problems. Just for instance, it may be hard to understand, but there's people in the world, and there's people in Krishna consciousness that are really struggling, and they're going through really intense things that we can't even imagine. I don't really want to get into that, but there's things that sometimes, I've heard in the material world, and also heard with, the material world speaking, just in the karmi sphere, and also heard within devotees' lives that just you hear it, and it just, I don't know if you've all had that experience. You hear something that someone's going through, and it just disturbs your mind because it's just so intense. And it's just there isn't it's not whatever, you burn the rice, so therefore, okay, just cook another thing of rice. It's someone may have married somebody, and then that person, stopped being a devotee, and then now they're trying to sue them or steal from them or whatever. This happens in the material world. Someone marries somebody, then that person tries to kill them or whatever it is. You're in a situation and you're locked into that for, there's it's not the end is in sight. It's for a long time coming. And it may be different things. One may also have some health problem or whatever. So, but, sometimes gurus, they hear the heaviest things, or the disciples do the craziest things or whatever it is, and people come to them when they don't, people don't go to the guru, whatever, I have this whatever. I'm trying to think of some simple problem that's easily adjusted. Oh, I have this problem. I eat too much, and sometimes my stomach hurts. So what should I do? Usually it's like I'm suffering intensely, and this happened, and then I'm in this situation. I don't know what to do. Just like it's mentioned, it's pretty heavy. But one disciple had went to jail, and he wrote to Srila Prabhupada a letter explaining about how he was in jail, he was suffering, and he was being raped every day actually in jail by other inmates. And so Hari Sari saw that, and he actually didn't give that to Prabhupada because he was thinking that this is just going to disturb Prabhupada and like that, and what can Prabhupada do in that situation? What can be done in that situation? So some spiritual masters sometimes hear information like this, and it's disturbing, and somehow or other they have to deal with that and help with that. So in all situations, no matter who we are, where we are, we can take shelter of Nrsimhadeva and take shelter of this prayer that is offered to help us in this material world and help us execute our service to do things nicely. Because the material world is a scary place, it's a dark place, and even too, we may be in such a scary place, but then also too, we may scare ourselves sometimes by, how attracted we may be to the material energy, or how envious we may be of other devotees or of other people or whatever the situation may be. So we can pray to Nrsimhadeva in that mood, and we can pray for his mercy, because his mercy is still here, and we can pray to him, and we can read this pastime, and we can take inspiration from that. And we can see, Nrsimhadeva protects his devotee, Prahlad Maharaj, by killing the demon Hiranyakasipu, but then we can see also too that we have desires like Hiranyakasipu, for whatever, we may not desire to get all the gold in the universe and then, enjoy with all the women in the universe, but maybe we desire it in a smaller way, to enjoy in one particular way or another. But we have to pray, and we have to understand that the situation is serious and it's intense. We have to be serious about Krishna consciousness and not wait for another life. We have to make Krishna consciousness the priority in this life, the focus, the aim, the goal. We have to center everything around that. Because if we begin to put it to the side and put other things as more important, then there'll be difficulties, there'll be problem, and then we'll have mission drift, either within collectively or individually. And we'll think so many other things are important except Krishna consciousness. And there may be situations which we have to put Krishna consciousness in the background. But if we have to put Krishna consciousness in the background for whatever reason it may be, or whatever, we can't chant our rounds in the morning, or the situation may be, we shouldn't, at least philosophically or mentally, we should always remember that Krishna consciousness is the foremost duty of situation. But one reason or other, I'm in a situation where I'm not able to do that, but this is the aim and this is the goal of life, and I have to get in a situation or move towards where I can put Krishna consciousness in the center, where I can openly be a devotee, where I can chant, where I can hear about Krishna regularly, where I can engage 24 hours a day, because that's the essence of all vice. The essence of all the vice isn't that, how to win friends and influence people, and how to be successful in your career, and how to be, how to make everybody happy in the material world. The essence of all advice is the 24 hours to be engaged in devotional service in Krishna consciousness. So we have to get ourselves in that situation. So I'm just going to read a couple verses here and then end with the class. So I'm just going to read these verses that Prahlad Maharaj offers. Well, actually, I don't. It's not so much time, so actually, I'm not going to read all of them. You can read them if you want. These verses. So these are prayers that Prahlad Maharaj offers in Canto 5, Chapter 18, verses 8 to 14. I'm just going to read the next text 9, and end with that. So Prahlad Maharaj says, "May there be good fortune throughout the universe, and may all envious persons be pacified. May all living entities become calm by practicing bhakti yoga, for by accepting devotional service, they will think of each other's welfare. Therefore, let us all engage in the service of the Supreme Transcendence, Lord Sri Krishna, and always remain absorbed in thought of Him." So this is the goal of life, and this is the prayer of the great devotees. This is the mood of Srila Prabhupada and the mission of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, to somehow or other bless the entire world, the entire universe. And specifically on this planet, the mission is to spread Krishna consciousness in every single town and village, and to allow everybody to remain absorbed in thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna. So, I'll end there if there's any questions or comments about anything. Okay, not much time. So, end it there, huh? Okay. All right. Srila Prabhupada ki. Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Hare Krishna.